All right. Um, so up on top on your fur, I'm gonna tip it so that it's easier for me to pull. Okay, we're gonna kind of do the same as the beard. We're gonna pull some rake brush white lines, and then we're gonna get some thin liner brush lines. Okay, now this time, you know how we kind of left separate rows? This, and I'm going to just start with my rake. Okay, so this time I am going to start on, the outside row here and pull the tips. And I don't have to follow the same direction necessarily as the first time. I want it to kind of flip a little this way, that way. Okay, there again, I'm not filling in solid. I'm just adding to that row. Okay, so that's row number 1. Now remember when we did row 2, we stayed back away from it, but this time I want to slightly overlap. So now they're going to start looking like it's more connected. So slightly overlap the row in front. And just keep working all the way back. And just try not to make it look like it's filled in solid. Sometimes I can stop at this stage. Sometimes I need to add liner brush. So once you get this done, look, see if you need some individual lines to break it up. So just fill in all the rows. Kind of overlapping. And you can always add some fine lines in there if you need to break things up a little bit more. Turn it around here. So let me try pulling from the inside out too. Let's see which one feels better. Just try to have a light touch when you first set it down if you're pulling from the inside out. Play with it, see which way feels better. And I'm still doing it more like it's clumps of fur rather than individual hairs. So it's more like a animal hair, animal fur. I'm just going to strengthen a few of them here and there that I got a little wimpy with. And I don't know that I'm going to need to do the liner brush lines on mine. I'm kind of liking what I got here because I do want it to look different than the beard. I don't want them to look like it's all the same thing. I want a little bit of difference. And you can do the little pom-pom anytime too. Just add the little white lines coming through on that too. And it's amazing how you can trace the same pattern on, and every time you do it, it's going to look a little bit different. His expression compared to the original is a little different. Let's see if I can get them side by side here. And this one's a little bit lighter color on this second one. I'm a little lighter than I was the first time. Now I do think I want some individual lines in the pom-pom, so I am going to take my liner brush and just add a few little flyaway hairs in there. I want to show you how to do the pine needles next, and what I'm going to use is my wave angle brush, and it has like little jaggedy tips on it, like you took a little pinking shears and chopped it off. I started by basing in my berries first. I did undercoat them with medium white, any kind of an off-white, and then I put on a coat of coral blush. Any coral color is going to work. Then let that dry. I might need to put one more coat, or I might need to touch up, but I like to have that in there just so that I kind of avoid them as I'm doing my pine needles and I remember where they go. Now I've only traced on the center vein line for the pine needles, and I'm going to start with my pine green, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold my brush kind of horizontal to my palette as I load that color on there. Now if your paint's been sitting out a while, take a little dab of water and add into it. You want it loose enough to be able to come off. But normally fresh from the bottle is just fine. So pat that in. Then double check your little tips. You want to be able to see those little wavy edges and not a big clump of paint. When I go to set this down to do all my pine needles, I just set and lift. I'm not going to pull a stroke. Set and lift. And you get this little irregular line, which is really cool. So I'm going to just start by just tapping in where the vein line is, getting all those graphite lines, and just quickly tap those in, just with the pine green to start with, whatever your dark green is that you're using. And two more here. Okay, then same color, and now this time when I go to set it down, if I just set it down at an angle coming down, that's how I can create pine needles. But I like them to be a little bit varied in length. So what I do is I kind of tap in and out, making them all different lengths, and just tapping with the tip. If you push down too hard, you're going to get a real thick line. So just a very gentle little tap, kind of back and forth, to fill in each of your pine needles. And I'm going to do that to all the pine needles, and then I'll come back with another color. then any of the little holes where I can't actually fit an actual needle, I just take the tip and kind of tap in a little bit of green, and I'm only going to do the dark green in those areas just to give it a little bit of filler. Don't be afraid to overlap your pine needles with the colors as you go across. You don't want great big gaps in between them. Okay, now I'm going to switch to my lighter green, and I'm just going to get the excess off on my paper towel. I'm not going to even clean my brush. I'm going to load that with some of the Irish moss, and I'm going to go back over, and I want the majority of the color to be at the tips, and then kind of run out of color as you come down to the base. Also going to add some on the center vein again. So start at the tips, just tapping, getting brighter green, and kind of run out of paint as you get towards the berries, and then a little bit in the center vein. So do that for all the pine needles. Then I want to get a few brighter tips, especially on the ones in the center here. There again, not going to clean my brush, just going to get some white on the long tip this time. Kind of pat that down. I flatten the brush so that I can still see those tips. And I'm just going to catch some of the very tips this time with that color. Okay, and I'm not going to do this one on top. That way that'll make it look like it's going a little bit more into the background. I'm not going to go all the way to the berries this time. Just catching those outer tips. And if you ran out of the Irish moss, I do like to put a little bit more on that short corner, just so I have a little mix of color. Okay, and then I can decide, do I want these last two to be dark so they look like they're pushing into the background? Do I want a little bit on one or the other? I think on this one I'm going to leave these two dark, and I'm going to leave the one on top dark. But you just kind of look at yours, because as you do it, every time it's just a little bit different. Also, see if you need just a little tap in the very top of your center vein of this color to make it look like it's more connected. One more thing is, I sometimes like to add a little bit of yellow in there, so I'm just going to blot my brush again, get a little bit of yellow on the tip, and just kind of randomly put a little bit just to get some extra color, and maybe just on the ones that you have the highlight on them. And I could have picked a different green color to put in there as well. Just give it a little bit more interest. Let me show you how to do the berries next. So I've got them base coated with my coral blush, undercoated them first with the medium white so the coral blush shows up better. And I am going to use my extender blending method with my double-ended brush. So dip both ends of the brush in extender. And I have found out that the Traditions Extender Blending Medium is going to be continued. I did get a message from Rosemary at DecoArt that is going to be continued for sure. So that's awesome. So both ends of the brush, and then I wiped them off on my paper towel. Now, you may or may not have to moisten. I'm going to try without moistening. I'm going to get just a little bit of my quinacridone violet, kind of pat that into the bristles on my long pointed round end of my Jillybean Dirty Dancer. And I'm going to put like a C shape on the back side and flip my brush and just barely catch that clean edge and just soften that in. And every time I do that, I am going to wipe my brush off on my paper towel to get the excess paint off. So a little C shape, flip your brush, and soften. Now the berries that are in the middle, I've got them going under. So when I put the color on, I'm going to curve to create, make sure that I've got the curve on the berry on top of it, and then catch some on the side. Flip the brush and soften. I still want it to look like it's rounded in the middle. As my paint on my brush gets a little dry, I'm going to stop and get just a little drop of extender to mix into my quinacridone violet so that it comes off the brush easier. So pat that in. There again, this berry is underneath, so I want to follow the curve of the berry on top. Kind of round out there though in the middle of the berry and soften. And then just continue doing the rest of your berries. Okay, then it's up to you whether you want to put a highlight on the opposite end. My coral blush is light enough that I don't feel I need to put a highlight over there. You may want to check, see if you need to clean up any of the edges though. If you need to, you know, re-outline them a little bit or something, I would use your base coat color, which was my coral blush, and I can just clean up that edge, flip the brush, and soften. And that would be the same if you decided you wanted them a little lighter. And for a lighter color, it's always easy to take your color that you base coated with, add a little bit of white so that you're making a lighter value, and use that as a highlight if you need it. But otherwise, I'm just cleaning up the edges with my original base coat color and leave it at that. Just a simplified version of berries. I also put a little white dot in each of them with a stylus. So I just took a stylus, dipped it in the white, added a little dot in each of the berries. Sometimes I'll do it with a dark color also. The other thing that I did was I put some little gold dots sprinkled throughout, and there again, just use a stylus. And I use the DecoArt Extreme Sheen 24 karat gold, but you could also use the gold metallic Glorious Gold or Emperor's Gold. So just dip in and add random little dots. Just to give it a little bit more interest. And that is it for your pine needles and berries. So just take a look at the finished one here. You're also going to do the same thing on the back of the hat. Just draw a couple lines coming in, 2 or 3, add your greenery, add a couple berries to help finish off the back of the hat. On the top of the Santa mitten, I have a buffalo plaid, and this stencil is available from my website as well, jillybean.net. What I like using for my stencil brush is the Dynasty Stencil Pro. Absolutely love these brushes. They have a stiffer synthetic bristle, and they stay clumped together so you don't get those individual hairs that seem to spread underneath of your stencil. I'm going to use a little bit dirtier one here to actually show you how I do this. So the first thing is I really plump it up with lots of color. My base coat underneath the stencil, that was red, any bright red. I did use the Traditions Naphthol red on mine. And then this is just the Americana Lamp Black that I'm adding to the stencil brush. Now I've got it plumped up nice and full, but then I want to pinch all of the extra paint out of there because I want to use it a little bit more dry and I don't want the excess paint seeping underneath my stencil. When I go to do this, I want to have a very gentle touch. Don't push down, and I do a very careful little circular motion. And a little is going to go a long way. So I'm just going to start out in a spot here. Oh, and also let me tell you before I get too far, I did take the stencil and I placed it in the middle, and then I'll continue on each side. That way I get a more even edge on both sides. And then if you take a look at, I've got a little bit of a ridge of red showing above and below that one area of the stencil as well. Up to you whether you want that or not. You could go all the way up to the very top edge if you wanted to. Okay, so no putting any pressure down. I'm just going in a nice little circular motion. And then if you want to take a little peek, you can see I'm getting a nice even coating on there. I did tape it down on the bottom so that it wouldn't shift on me. And I also put tape underneath the red area so that I wouldn't mess into my design. So I'm very gentle touch, and you can kind of reverse the motion, you know, your little circle, go this way and that way to get it on. As you start running out of paint, and see, I've gone quite a ways here so far without running out. And I'm going to go ahead and go right on down over the tape there. But as you start running out of paint, I might put just a little bit more pressure down as I'm doing these circles, but I should be able to get the entire area with just one load. And then I'll think about reloading after I move the pattern a little bit to see where it goes. So with the old style of stencil brushes, I always used to have trouble with the paint seeping underneath. And I would take and I would tape the bristles together around, you know, the circumference to keep them from spreading out. And with the Stencil Pro by Dynasty, I don't have to do that. It really holds its shape nice. Okay, so let's take a look. That looks good. And then you'll see this is on top of my tape. When I take my tape off, it'll be more even. Okay, so I like what I've got. I'm going to reconnect and line up my stencil from where I left off so I can continue on each side. Get that as even as possible and tape it down. Now I do want to add a little more paint in my brush. Now, just remember, you still want to get that pinched out of your brush. And sometimes I'll even do a little circle just to make sure I don't have any excess on those tips. Real gentle touch. Don't press down when you first start out. Barely skim the surface, because if you have too much paint, you can sometimes avoid that little unwanted seepage under the stencil by not pressing down so hard. So just get that all the way over to the edge, and there again, I'll take a look, and that looks good. All right, and then I'm going to move this over, reline up my pattern again. Let's see, I'll get a little bit over here. That should be close. Tape it down. And I should still have enough on my brush to finish this side as well. Okay, now on my original recording, this part of the class accidentally got corrupt. So I am refilming this so that you know how to finish this off. Okay, so there's my pattern, and I'm going to pull my tape off. Hopefully I can get it off here. Let me try to catch I might have to get a little stylus to pick it off just a bit, because I had it flipped down under there. So let's get that off. All right. Okay, now I'm going to pull the bottom one off. I put 2 tapes on just in case, but you probably only need 1, your blue painter's tape. Okay, now when I go to pull off this one, I usually try to pull at an angle. That way I get a straighter edge, and if any paint is wet, I don't end up messing it up. And so that's all there is to the stenciling. When it comes to cleaning your stencil brush, usually what I do is I try to get most of it off with just some soap and water first. I'll just get the majority off just with some water here to start with. And I just use, you can use a brush cleaner, or take it to your sink and use dish soap or any kind of a hand soap that you have. A lot of times, if I'm teaching at a convention or seminar, I don't have the option always to be able to get to a sink, and I don't want the paint to dry. So I'm going to just take some hand sanitizer, and I'm going to use that to really get that extra stubborn paint out of the brush. And it really does but I still want to wash it with soap and water after I do the hand sanitizer, so that I get, all of that out there. But it does a pretty good job of getting that out. And this brush was dirty to begin with. But you'll see the hand sanitizer got a lot more out than just the water did. So that's another little trick that you can use. When it comes to the stencil, honestly, I prefer not to clean them. The problem is people rub too hard and then end up getting the little areas bent, and then it's really hard to use it again. So I usually just leave it. You could gently take some hand sanitizer on this as well and softly wipe off, but unless I've got a ton of paint, kind of getting in between the little pieces of the design, I prefer just to leave it. So hope that gives you a little bit of a hint of what to do for cleaning. So thank you so much for joining me for this class, and I look forward to seeing you again another time.